Okay, so if you're watching this video, you have a Freightliner chassis and you have the dreaded VDC, the Vehicle Data Computer Controller issue. And what this is it is a known issue with VDCs in the 99-2000 range where the data or the computer that collects the information for your pressure in your air brake system, the solder joint is bad. And so you can be driving down the road and that solder joint will go cold, and all of a sudden your pressure gauge drops to 0 and the buzzer warns you that you have no air pressure, and you completely freak out. And after you lose a good pair of underwear, you figure out, oh, that's the VDC issue. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take, I'm having the same issue with mine, so we're going to take the VDC out of my Discovery. We are going to resolder that joint and put it back together. So let's get to it. Now, before we can take the VDC off, we have to release all of the air in the system so that we can remove the air lines that go to the VDC. All right, so here is my electrical bay, batteries over here, and all of my electronics over here. You can see my dog bones hanging over here on the left. Back in there is the BCC. Up here is a diagnostic port similar to the one that's underneath the driver's seat where you plug in Bluefire or a VMS PC. Over here on the right, you'll see here is my Progressive Industries EMS system for 30 amp. And then right behind it, right here, that is the infamous VDC with the issue of your pressure gauges going bad or reading 0. And back here are where the two air pressure lines come in, and right on the other side of this is where the solder joints are. So let's get in there, let's resolder them, and let's fix this issue. Now, as you can see, the brain surgeons that designed this put a nut out here on the outside of this bolt that's on the back, but the bolt isn't part of this panel. So when you try to get this nut off, the bolt just spins, and to get back in there, there's maybe an inch, and back behind it is, again, you need a few elbows to do this. And comes out just like that. All right, so the VDC's out and on the bench, so let's take a look at it. All right, so this is what the VDC looks like. On the outside, or the side that you were looking at, it sits in there like this. It's got those connectors here, and then the places where the air plugs in here. When we turn it over, we can see the back side of this, and it is sealed up all the way around with caulk. So what we're gonna have to do is remove that seal by just using a knife and gently going all the way around and prying this up. This should be butyl tape or something similar to it, so it's not an adhesive, but it is enough to keep this closed. Now you can see that this one was replaced at 11,358 miles, but the solder joint has gone cold again on this one, so let's fix it. Again, this is, I think it's a substance like butyl tape, so you don't force it at all. You just give it a little pressure. That's the best way to describe it, is not trying to pry it up, but just giving it just a little bit of pressure so that this butyl tape will release. And it's just slow and methodical. You can kind of go all the way around. Again, real slow. We're not trying to pop it off. We're trying to kind of give it a reason why it wants to. So just a hair of pressure. You don't want to crack anything or break anything. Just and again, because I think it is some kind of a butyl tape, it is relatively simple to do. And there is the inside. Alright, so there's a little bag of desiccant that's in there, and then there's also the circuit board. And what we're going to look at is actually underneath this right here. You can see on the back side of this is where the air pressure comes in at, and when we turn it around, we see that on the other side is this piece of metal that is screwed on. So let's go ahead and take that cover off. I love to work on styrofoam because then you can just stick stuff into the styrofoam and it doesn't roll around or leave. Alright, back to the cover here. We'll take this cover off. And you can see that here are the solder joints that are suspect. These are the ones that go cold, and so we want to resolder those. So I have my soldering gun here with a really fine point. Alright, so as you can see, here are the sensors for the pressure, and it's got 4 pins coming off of it. And one of the things that you can do to see if you have a current issue, now sometimes this is an intermittent issue, so if you test it and it tests out right, it still could go bad after a while. But what we can do is we can set our multimeter for continuity, and we can test across the leg of the first leg of this sensor, and then the solder joint on one side, or where that solder joint goes. So we know that it's good from here to the other side, that T3. So let's check the other one, and the other one, and the other one. Now we can also, this is a printed circuit board, so you can see where that goes. So it comes into here and across to here, and then that little line there says that it comes to this side of this resistor. So we can test from here to the resistor, and that's good. This third one here, it comes from here and then comes over to this resistor. So there's continuity there. We can go to this one, and here, and also to this resistor, here to this resistor, and also from here to there. So as it sits right now, this is good, but I know that it's intermittent. I know that this worked on the way home, but it didn't work a day ago. So what I'm going to do is resolder these pins right here. Now what you can do here, I have a solder extractor, and this tool here, you prime it, and then once the solder gets hot and starts to melt, you press this button and it sucks the solder up through that little tube. So you can desolder and then resolder. What I'm going to do is just resolder the existing solder that's here. So my soldering iron over here I've got set at 515 degrees. I have a small round of rosin core solder. And so what we're going to do is we are going to solder these individual 8 points right there. And you can see here I will touch them with the point of the solder. So we are going to solder that, 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 and then we're going to solder this, 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 and this. Now it's real important that we have a fine tip soldering iron. So I have the smallest tip that I have with my station, which is this tip right here. It's real pointy, and right now it is 515 degrees. Okay, so I'm running that tip pretty hot. And one of the reasons is that you don't want to expose the printed circuit board or those electronics on it to heat for a long time. So what I want is that tip of my soldering iron to be real hot so that as soon as it touches that solder, it can liquefy it, and that heat doesn't travel back through the board and into a resistor or into a transducer or something like that that would ruin that. So I want to just heat up the solder real quick to liquefy it and then let it cool back down and connect up to whatever the solder is connecting. So all I'm going to do really is just touch each point So I'm just going to touch that with the soldering iron until it liquefies, and then we'll let off. And so what I want to do is liquefy it and then let it reflow back in because that joint has gone cold. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so we've done that one. Now if we want to, we can also touch these right here. We don't have anything in there, but that does liquefy those. Now let's move over to the one on the other side and do the same thing. You don't want to leave your tip on here very long, because we certainly don't want to damage anything that's already there. And there we go. Those are now all checked out. So now what we can do is get our multimeter back on and we can test it out. Alright, so now let's test the joints. We can put our one probe up here and one probe down here. Alright, and on the next one, and then also at the resistor, and the next one here, and at the resistor, and the next one here at the resistor. Now what we're also going to do, since we've done some soldering, we want to make sure that we haven't cross soldered anything before we plug this back up, so we're going to test it across the legs. Alright, so that is good. And now let's go back over here to the other one and do the same thing. Test. Test here. Alright, so that appears that we have fixed this for the time being. It also helps to have a pair of magnifying eyeglasses because those are some tiny things. So now we'll put the back on this and we'll reinstall it in the rig. Alright, so now that we are done with the resoldering of those, we're going to have to put everything back together. Now one thing that's real important, and that is that on these, you'll see there's a little plastic, looks like a plastic washer on both of them, and that could have come out when you removed the shield, this metal shield right here. So make sure before you put the shield back in, make sure that those two plastic washers are on both of those, and then we can put the shield back on and the screws back in. Alright, now that that's done, we can put the cover back on here. We'll need to freshen up the edges where the butyl tape is. Alright, so once that is done, we're going to put the grommets back in. And now we'll go install that back into the RV. So the catch is to just get one started at a time and then just get the bolt on it. So you don't lose the bolt back in behind, because that, like that. Well, luckily it was on one of the front ones. Now, once everything is pinned with 2 bolts, it's a smart idea to go ahead and put everything back together as far as all your connections, the air lines, the data lines, and then go turn the key and make sure that everything is working fine. You don't have any air leaks and that kind of stuff. So we'll do that now, and then we'll come back and we'll finish putting and tightening up the last 2 bolts, especially that hard to get one, and then it'll be done. And that's how you fix the VDC issue. You just want to always make sure that those solder joints there are nice and shiny. A dull color indicates a cold solder joint. Touch them up, put them back in. You should now get both air gauges reading correctly and not hear the buzzing all the time. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. But get out there, RV, have fun with your family. Dive in, get into some more difficult stuff. Get outside of your comfort zone, but make sure you make it to church on Sunday.